The Queen's ultimatum. Marcus's wrists ached as the heavy chains dug into his skin. Two towering alien guards dragged him into the grand court of Queen Zerathia. The air was thick with tension, the alien courtiers whispering and watching the human with mocking smiles. The Queen's throne was carved from what looked like glowing crystal, and her presence was overwhelming. Her silver scales shimmered, her golden eyes piercing through Marcus like daggers. Marcus had heard the stories. Queen Zerathia was infamous across the galaxy. She ruled not just with an iron fist, but with cruel games that kept her court entertained. Those who failed her trials didn't just die. They suffered slow, agonizing ends that made even the bravest warriors shiver. As Marcus was shoved to his knees before her, he fought to keep his breathing steady. He wasn't just a slave. He was human, the last of his kind in this cruel court. If he showed fear, it would only feed her amusement. "Ah, the human," Zerathia said, her voice smooth and commanding. "I have heard much about your kind. Fragile, yet resourceful. Weak, yet cunning." She leaned forward, her golden eyes narrowing. "Tell me, Marcus, do you value your life?" Marcus swallowed hard. The court fell silent, waiting for his answer. He knew this wasn't a question. It was a trap. But staying silent would be worse. "Yes, Your Majesty," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. The Queen's lips curved into a cruel smile. "Good. Then perhaps you will amuse me. You see, I am bored. And when I am bored, I crave entertainment." She waved a clawed hand, and a servant stepped forward, carrying a strange box filled with tools Marcus didn't recognize. "This," she continued, "is a simple test. Impress me with your intelligence, your creativity, your human spirit." Her smile sharpened. "But fail to entertain me, and I will personally see to your execution." Painfully, of course. The court erupted into laughter, but Marcus's mind raced. He stared at the tools in the box. They looked alien, some glowing, others humming softly, but none of it made sense. What was he supposed to do with them? The Queen's voice cut through his thoughts. "You have 1 hour, Marcus. Begin." The guards removed his chains and stepped back. Marcus hesitated for only a moment before reaching into the box. His hands brushed against something warm and metallic. He pulled out a small sphere that seemed to hum faintly in his palm. He turned it over, noticing tiny grooves and etchings. It was some sort of alien tech, but what did it do? The courtiers whispered and chuckled, clearly betting on his failure. Marcus blocked them out. He had always been good at puzzles back on Earth. This was just another problem to solve, one that could save his life. He examined the other tools, a thin rod that glowed faintly, a set of discs with strange markings, and a sheet of material that felt like liquid metal. Slowly, an idea began to form. If he could fit the pieces together, maybe he could create something functional. He had no idea what the Queen wanted, but if he could show some ingenuity, perhaps it would buy him time. The minutes ticked by as Marcus worked. His fingers moved quickly, assembling the pieces, testing how they interacted. Sweat dripped down his face. But he didn't stop. He couldn't afford to. The courtiers grew restless, some yawning, others throwing insults. The Queen, however, watched in silence, her golden eyes fixed on Marcus. Finally, the hour was up. Marcus stood, holding the finished product, a small spinning device that emitted a soft, glowing light. It wasn't much, but it was the best he could do with tools he didn't understand. He stepped forward and presented it to the Queen. Zerathia raised an eyebrow, taking the device in her clawed hand. The court fell silent as she examined it. For a long moment, Marcus thought she might crush it in her grip and order his execution. But then she laughed, a sound that sent shivers down his spine. "Interesting," she said, holding the device up for the court to see. "Primitive, yet clever. A spark of creativity in this fragile creature." The court erupted into applause. though Marcus could tell it was more out of fear than genuine admiration. The queen's smile grew sharper as she leaned closer to him. "You have survived your first test, human, but do not celebrate too soon. My curiosity is far from satisfied." Marcus's relief was short-lived as her words sank in. This was only the beginning. The queen's eyes burned with a dangerous light, and Marcus realized she wouldn't stop until she had pushed him to his limits, or beyond. As the guards chained him again and led him out of the court, Marcus clenched his fists. He had survived, but at what cost? The queen's games were far from over, and if he was going to make it out alive, he would need more than just luck. He would need to outsmart her at every turn. For the first time, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. If the queen wanted a game, then he would play. And maybe, just maybe, he would win. The first test. The cold metal of the chains around Marcus's wrists felt heavier than before as he sat in a dimly lit cell. The whispers of the alien courtiers from the queen's court still echoed in his mind. He had survived the first encounter with Queen Zerethia, but her parting words had been clear. This was just the beginning. His heart sank every time he thought about her golden eyes, gleaming with amusement and cruelty. The queen wasn't just testing him. She was playing with him like a cat with a mouse. Suddenly, the heavy cell door creaked open, and two of the queen's guards stepped inside. Their towering forms loomed over him, their alien features unreadable. Without a word, they yanked him to his feet and led him down a labyrinth of corridors. The walls shimmered with faint bioluminescent patterns, almost hypnotic in their alien beauty. But Marcus had no time to admire them. His mind raced, wondering what kind of nightmare awaited him next. When they finally stopped, the guards shoved him into a circular chamber. The air here felt heavier, charged with a strange energy that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. In the center of the room was a pedestal, and atop it rested a glowing sphere about the size of a basketball. Strange, intricate patterns pulsed across its surface like veins of light. The queen's voice boomed through the chamber, though she was nowhere to be seen. "Welcome, human. You impressed me once, but now the true test begins. Before you stands an artifact of my people, a relic from ages past. Its purpose is unknown, even to me. You have 1 hour to unlock its secrets. Fail, and I will not be so merciful this time." Marcus stared at the glowing sphere, his mind a whirlwind of fear and determination. The court, watching from unseen places, laughed and jeered at the human who dared to face the queen's whims. "Let the game begin," the queen's voice commanded. Taking a deep breath, Marcus stepped forward, his heart pounding. He reached out, hesitant but curious, and touched the sphere. The moment his fingers made contact, a jolt of energy surged through him. He pulled back instinctively, but the sphere began to hum, its patterns shifting and glowing brighter. It was alive, or something like it. "What are you?" Marcus whispered to himself, his brow furrowed. He examined the sphere more closely. The surface was covered in strange indentations and grooves, almost like a puzzle. But these were no ordinary markings. They shifted and moved as if responding to his presence. He tried pressing one of the grooves, and the sphere emitted a soft chime. Encouraged, he pressed another, but this time, the sphere pulsed with a sharp red light and let out a low, menacing hum. A warning. "Great," Marcus muttered. "A puzzle that punishes you for guessing wrong." The clock was ticking, and he could feel the weight of the queen's unseen gaze. This wasn't just about solving a puzzle. It was a psychological game, designed to break him. But Marcus had one thing on his side, his human stubbornness. If the queen thought he would crumble under pressure, she was wrong. He began testing the grooves methodically, trying to find a pattern. With each correct press, the sphere rewarded him with a musical chime and a new set of glowing patterns. It was like solving a lock, one layer at a time. But the deeper he went, the more complex the patterns became, shifting faster and requiring quicker reactions. Sweat dripped down his face as the hour neared its halfway point. His hands moved with increasing urgency, and his mind worked in overdrive to keep up with the puzzle's escalating difficulty. At one point, the sphere's hum turned into a piercing wail, and Marcus realized he had triggered some sort of fail-safe. The pedestal began to glow red, and the floor beneath him trembled. "Come on," he muttered, frantically pressing the grooves. He couldn't let this be the end. Not like this. Just as the vibrations grew stronger, Marcus spotted a pattern he hadn't noticed before, a series of grooves forming a faint spiral. Taking the gamble, he pressed them in sequence. The wailing stopped, and the sphere emitted a deep, resonant chime. The pedestal's glow shifted to a calming blue, and the patterns on the sphere stabilized. Marcus exhaled a shaky breath as the sphere floated off the pedestal, its light growing brighter. It hovered in the air, projecting a series of holographic symbols and images. The court fell silent, the queen's voice cutting through the stillness. "Fascinating," she said, her tone laced with intrigue. "You have unlocked the artifact's core, a feat none of my own scholars have achieved." Marcus stared at the holograms, feeling a mix of pride and exhaustion. He didn't understand what the symbols meant, but it didn't matter. He had survived another day. The queen's voice turned cold. "You continue to amuse me, human. But know this, my patience is not infinite. The next test will demand more than just your cleverness. Prepare yourself." Before Marcus could respond, the guards dragged him out of the chamber, the sphere's glow fading behind him. His body ached, his mind was exhausted, but a small flame of hope burned in his chest. He had proven himself twice now. If he could keep this up, maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to turn the queen's game against her. As the cell doors slammed shut behind him, Marcus sat down and stared at the cold floor. He didn't know how much longer he could keep going, but one thing was clear. He wasn't going down without a fight. A secret ally. The darkness of the cell wrapped around Marcus like a suffocating blanket. The only sound was the faint hum of energy coursing through the walls. His muscles ached from the strain of the last trial, and his mind reeled from the queen's ominous words. Each test pushed him closer to the brink, and he knew the next one would be even worse. He needed a plan, a way out with the queen. But how could he fight her when he was completely alone? Or was he? A soft sound broke the silence. Marcus froze, straining his ears. It wasn't the usual mechanical whir of the guards or the distant laughter of the courtiers. It was a faint tapping, deliberate and rhythmic. His eyes darted to the barred door of his cell, but nothing moved. The sound was coming from the wall. "Is someone there?" Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. The tapping stopped. For a moment, there was silence, and then a quiet voice replied, "Keep your voice down, human. They're always listening." Marcus's heart leaped. Another prisoner? An ally? Or perhaps another of the queen's cruel tricks? "Who are you?" Marcus asked cautiously. "A friend," the voice said. It was deep but quiet, with an alien accent that was strange yet soothing. "And if you want to survive, you'll need my help." Marcus hesitated. Trust was dangerous here. For all he knew, this could be one of the queen's courtiers, testing his resolve. But he had no other options. "I'm listening." The voice grew more confident. "You're not the first human to stand in Zarathia's court. There have been others before you, but none have survived as long as you have." "Others?" Marcus whispered, his blood running cold. "What happened to them?" The voice hesitated, then replied grimly, "They were broken. The queen's games are designed to crush the spirit, not just the body. She delights in watching her prey lose hope." Marcus swallowed hard. He had already guessed as much, but hearing it confirmed was chilling. "So why are you helping me?" "Because I've been here too long," the voice replied. "And I've seen too much. If anyone can challenge the queen, it's you." Marcus frowned. "Why me?" "Because you're human," the voice said simply. "You're kind. You're different. Resourceful. Unpredictable. The queen doesn't fully understand you, and that's your advantage." The words gave Marcus a flicker of hope. "All right. What do you know about her games? How can I survive the next trial?" The voice shifted closer, its tone growing urgent. "Zirathia thrives on control. She manipulates every situation, every challenge, to ensure her dominance. But she's not infallible. She has weaknesses, pride, arrogance, and most importantly, a hunger for novelty. If you can surprise her, even just once, it might give you the opening you need." "Surprise her?" Marcus repeated. "How?" The voice hesitated again, then said, "I can't answer that for you. Her games are unpredictable. But I can give you something else." There was a rustling sound, and then something small slid through the narrow gap beneath the wall. Marcus reached down and picked it up. It was a tiny device, no larger than a coin, glowing faintly with blue light. The design was alien, intricate, and completely unfamiliar. "What is this?" Marcus asked, turning it over in his hand. "A tool," the voice replied. "It's a multi-purpose device I managed to hide from the guards. It can disrupt energy fields, short-circuit mechanisms, and even scramble surveillance feeds, if used correctly." Marcus's heart raced. "Why didn't you use it to escape?" The voice sighed. "Because I'm not like you. I've been here too long, and my time is running out. But you still have a chance." The weight of the device in his hand felt heavier now. Whoever this stranger was, they were risking everything to help him. Marcus clenched his fist around the tool, determination flaring in his chest. "Thank you," he said. "I won't waste this." The voice softened. "Be careful, human. The Queen is watching you more closely than ever. She senses something in you, a threat to her control. Use that against her." Before Marcus could respond, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. The guards were coming. The voice vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, and Marcus quickly hid the device beneath the thin mat that served as his bed. The cell door slammed open, and the guards marched in, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Without a word, they grabbed him and dragged him out once more. Marcus's mind raced as they led him through the maze-like corridors. He had no idea what the next trial would be, but now he had something the Queen hadn't planned for, a secret weapon. As the doors to the arena opened, Marcus stepped forward, his resolve stronger than ever. The Queen might control the rules of the game, but he was starting to realize something important. Every game has a way to be beaten, and he was determined to find it. The Queen's trap. The arena was unlike anything Marcus had seen before. The circular chamber was vast, its walls lined with shimmering alien glyphs that pulsed like a heartbeat. The air buzzed with energy, a low hum that made his skin prickle. Suspended in the center of the chamber was a massive, translucent orb, floating weightlessly. Within it, strange tendrils of light swirled and coiled like living things. Marcus's eyes darted around, searching for any clue about what this trial might entail. The orb was clearly the centerpiece, but its purpose was as enigmatic as everything else in the Queen's sadistic games. High above, on a balcony carved from obsidian, Queen Zirathia lounged on her throne, her golden eyes gleaming with malicious delight. "Welcome back, human," her voice rang out, amplified by the chamber. "You've done well to survive this far. But I grow bored of simple puzzles and challenges. Today, we'll see how much you value loyalty." Marcus's stomach churned at her words. He didn't like the sound of this. A door on the far side of the arena slid open with a hiss, and Marcus's heart stopped. A figure was dragged into the chamber, shackled and bound. It was an alien, shorter than the guards, with a lithe frame and mottled green skin. His face was unfamiliar, but Marcus recognized his voice immediately. It was the stranger who had helped him in the cell. "No," Marcus whispered under his breath, his fists clenching. The Queen's laughter echoed through the arena. "Ah, I see you recognize your little conspirator. Did you think I wouldn't notice? I've been watching both of you very closely." Marcus's mind raced. How had she found out? He thought back to the device the stranger had slipped him. Had she discovered it somehow? Or had she simply been waiting for the right moment to use this against him? The queen rose from her throne, her presence commanding. Here is your challenge, human. The orb before you is a prison of pure energy. Inside, you will find the key to unlock your friend's chains. But there is a catch. She gestured, and the orb pulsed, its tendrils of light writhing violently. The orb is alive. It reacts to the emotions of those who touch it. Fear will strengthen it. Hesitation will anchor it. Only calm and focus can guide you through its defenses. Marcus's jaw tightened. He knew this wouldn't be simple. The queen's smile grew colder. If you succeed, your friend will go free. But if you fail, she trailed off, snapping her fingers. A hidden panel in the wall slid open, revealing a monstrous alien creature. Its body was covered in sharp chitinous armor, and its 6 glowing eyes locked onto the prisoner with predatory hunger. Marcus's blood turned to ice. This wasn't just a test. It was a trap. You have 10 minutes, human, the queen said, settling back into her throne. Begin. The room fell silent except for the low growl of the creature and the hum of the orb. Marcus approached the glowing sphere, his mind racing. The stakes couldn't be higher. The queen had designed this challenge to push him to his breaking point, to force him to make a mistake. Marcus, the prisoner's voice called out weakly. You don't owe me anything. Just survive. Marcus shook his head. No, you helped me. I'm not letting you die. He placed his hands on the orb. The moment his skin touched its surface, a searing heat shot through his arms, and the tendrils of light lashed out violently. Marcus gritted his teeth, focusing on the patterns of the tendrils. They moved erratically, almost as if they were testing his resolve. Stay calm, he muttered to himself. Focus. The tendrils began to wrap around his hands, tightening like living ropes. Images flooded his mind. Earth in flames, humanity enslaved, his own death at the queen's hands. The orb was feeding on his deepest fears, trying to break his concentration. But Marcus fought back. He pushed the images aside, focusing on his breathing, on the patterns of the tendrils. Slowly, they began to respond, their movements synchronizing with his heartbeat. The heat subsided, replaced by a cool, almost soothing sensation. That's it, he whispered. I'm in. The tendrils shifted, parting to reveal a glowing core at the center of the orb. Within it, a small, intricate key floated, surrounded by a maze of light. Marcus's hands moved instinctively, navigating the maze, his every movement mirrored by the tendrils. It was a delicate dance, one wrong move threatening to send the orb into chaos. Minutes felt like hours as he worked. Sweat dripped down his face, and his arms ached from the strain. But finally, with a soft chime, the tendrils retreated, and the orb released the key into his hands. Marcus turned to the queen, holding the key aloft. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Annoyance. Frustration. He rushed to the prisoner, unlocking his chains just as the creature let out an ear-piercing roar. Freed, the alien stumbled to his feet, his gratitude evident even in his weakened state. The queen's laughter broke the tension. Impressive, human. You continue to surprise me. But don't think this is over. Each victory only brings you closer to your limits. As the guards dragged Marcus and the alien back to the cells, he felt a spark of defiance. He had beaten her trap, but more importantly, he had protected someone who believed in him. The queen might control the arena, but Marcus was starting to realize that her greatest weakness was her inability to predict the human spirit, and he would use that against her. The queen's hidden weakness. The cell was darker than usual when Marcus returned. The air felt heavier, filled with an unspoken tension. The alien he had saved, his unlikely ally, sat quietly in the corner, nursing his bruised wrists. Marcus leaned against the cold wall, his body aching from the trials, but his mind refused to rest. He could feel the queen's presence looming over him, even in her absence. Her games weren't just designed to test his body. They were tearing at his mind, pushing him closer to the edge. "You shouldn't have saved me," the alien said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was low, filled with a mixture of guilt and admiration. "She'll punish you for defying her." Marcus shook his head. "She's already punishing me. Saving you was the right thing to do." The alien studied him for a moment before nodding slowly. "You're different. Most would have let me die." Marcus didn't respond. He didn't know how to explain it, but he couldn't just let someone die, not when there was still a chance to fight back. He turned his attention to the small device his ally had given him earlier. It rested in his palm, its faint blue glow steady and calming. It had saved him once, and he suspected it would be useful again. But as he stared at the device, an idea began to form in his mind. The Queen's games weren't random. They were calculated, crafted to break her opponents. Yet in her arrogance, she always assumed she was in control. What if he could use that against her? The thought was interrupted by the sudden clang of footsteps echoing down the corridor. Marcus and his ally exchanged tense glances as the guards appeared at the cell door. "You," one of them growled, pointing at Marcus. "The Queen summons you." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he nodded. As the guards unlocked the cell and dragged him away, his ally whispered, "Stay strong, human. Remember, she's not invincible." The throne room was eerily quiet when Marcus arrived. Queen Zerethia sat on her crystalline throne, her golden eyes sharp and calculating. She leaned forward slightly, a predator watching its prey. "Ah, my favorite human," she purred. "You've been busy, haven't you? Saving lives, solving puzzles, defying the odds. It's almost entertaining." Marcus didn't respond. He had learned by now that anything he said could be twisted against him. The Queen's smile faded slightly, her gaze narrowing. "But I must admit, your defiance intrigues me. Most who stand where you are break long before now, yet you persist. Why?" Marcus met her gaze, his voice steady. "Because you want me to break, and I won't give you that satisfaction." The courtiers, gathered in the shadows, murmured in surprise at his boldness. But the Queen merely chuckled, a cold, unsettling sound. "Clever words," she said, "but words won't save you. Actions will. So let us continue." She waved a hand, and the room shifted. The walls shimmered, transforming into a massive, holographic map of the galaxy. Stars blinked into existence, their light casting eerie shadows across the room. At the center of the map was a glowing red sphere, Earth. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. It was the first time he had seen a depiction of his home since he had been taken. The sight filled him with a pang of longing and a surge of anger. "This," the Queen said, gesturing to the map, "is your origin. A tiny, insignificant world, filled with fragile creatures who think themselves important. And yet humans have a peculiar ability to disrupt the balance of power. It's why I find you so fascinating." Her tone turned colder. "But fascination has its limits. Tell me, Marcus, what would you do to protect your kind? To ensure they never fall into my hands?" Marcus's fists clenched. "What are you getting at?" The Queen smiled, and it sent a chill down his spine. "You see, there's something you don't know. Something I've kept hidden. Humans aren't just a threat because of their resilience or ingenuity. They're a threat because they remind me, of something we've lost." Her admission caught Marcus off guard. For a moment, her expression flickered, and he saw something unexpected in her eyes. Vulnerability. It was fleeting, but it was there. "You've seen it, haven't you?" The Queen continued, her voice softer now. "In my games, in my trials. The cracks in my perfect control. The truth is, human, I'm not invincible. And neither is my rule." The room fell silent. Marcus stared at her, trying to process her words. Was this another trick? Or was she revealing something she didn't mean to? Before he could respond, the Queen's demeanor shifted. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by icy resolve. She rose from her throne, towering over him. "But don't mistake my honesty for weakness," she said. "This next trial will test you in ways you cannot imagine. Fail, and not only will you die, but your home will suffer the consequences." The map flickered, Earth's red glow intensifying. Marcus's anger boiled over, but he forced himself to stay calm. She wanted him to react, to give her the satisfaction of seeing him break. Instead, he took a step forward, meeting her gaze. "You're right," he said, his voice steady. "You're not invincible, and that's how I'll beat you." The Queen's expression hardened, and for the first time, Marcus thought he saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. The guards seized him, dragging him back to his cell. But as he was hauled away, Marcus felt a surge of determination. The Queen's mask had slipped, even if only for a moment. She wasn't as untouchable as she wanted him to believe. He had found her weakness, and he would use it to end her games once and for all. The final trial. The arena was unrecognizable. Unlike the intricate puzzles and glowing artifacts of the past trials, this space was raw and primal. The floor was uneven, made of jagged rocks that glowed faintly with a molten hue. The air was thick with heat, carrying the scent of sulfur and ash. In the center of the arena stood a massive cage, its bars humming with a strange, pulsing energy. Inside was the largest creature Marcus had ever seen. The beast towered over everything, its muscular form covered in iridescent scales that shimmered between shades of black and gold. Its 6 glowing eyes scanned the room, each one burning with malice. Long, razor-sharp claws clicked against the rocky floor as it paced within its cage, snarling low and deep. This was no mere trial. This was a death sentence. High above, Queen Zerethia sat on her throne, her golden eyes gleaming with anticipation. She raised her hand, and the hum of the cage intensified. The beast roared, shaking the arena with its deafening cry. "Welcome to your final trial, human," the Queen announced, her voice echoing across the chamber. "You've impressed me time and time again, but the games must end. Today, you stand not against puzzles or artifacts, but against raw, unrelenting power." The cage's energy field dissipated, and the beast charged forward, slamming into the invisible barrier that kept it from Marcus. The ground trembled beneath his feet. "You have 1 hour," the Queen continued, her tone dripping with mockery. "Survive, and you will earn your freedom. Fail, and, well, I believe the outcome speaks for itself." Marcus stood frozen, his mind racing. The beast's claws alone were the size of his forearm. There was no way he could face it in combat and live. He glanced around the arena, searching for anything, any tool, weapon, or escape route that could help him. Then he remembered the device. Reaching into the hidden pocket of his tattered clothing, Marcus pulled out the small, glowing tool his ally had given him. Its faint blue light flickered, and he felt a surge of hope. The device had saved him once before. If he could use it again, maybe, just maybe, he could turn the Queen's game against her. The Queen's voice cut through his thoughts. "Oh, and one more thing." She snapped her fingers, and a second door slid open across the arena. Marcus's heart sank as 2 guards dragged his ally into the chamber, shackled and beaten. The Queen smirked. "To make things more interesting, you must ensure the survival of your friend as well. If he dies, so do you." The guards shoved the alien to the ground and left, the heavy door slamming shut behind them. Marcus ran to his ally's side, helping him to his feet. The alien's breathing was labored, and his eyes were filled with despair. "I told you not to save me," the alien rasped. "Now we're both going to die." Marcus shook his head. "Not if I can help it. Stay close to me. We'll figure this out." The beast roared again, its claws scraping against the rocky floor. The barrier separating them from the creature began to flicker, the Queen's laughter echoing overhead. "Time is ticking, human. Let's see how clever you really are." The barrier vanished. The beast lunged forward with terrifying speed, its claws slashing through the air. Marcus pulled his ally aside just in time, the ground where they had been standing exploding into shards of rock. The creature's roar was deafening, its 6 eyes locking onto Marcus with predatory intent. Marcus gripped the device tightly, his mind working faster than ever. He activated it, the blue glow intensifying as it hummed to life. The tendrils of light that emerged from the device scanned the environment, identifying weak points in the arena's structure. The Queen had underestimated him. "Keep moving," Marcus shouted to his ally as the beast charged again. He darted to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's claws. The tendrils of light from the device highlighted a series of glowing nodes embedded in the arena walls, control points for the energy field that had once contained the beast. An idea began to form. Marcus sprinted toward the nearest node, dodging the beast's attacks. He could feel its hot breath on his back as it pursued him relentlessly. Reaching the node, he pressed the device against it, the tendrils sinking into the alien machinery. The node sparked, and a section of the arena's ceiling collapsed, raining debris onto the beast. The creature roared in frustration, momentarily disoriented. Marcus didn't stop. He moved to the next node, repeating the process. Each time, the arena shifted, walls crumbled, barriers sprang up, and molten fissures opened in the ground. The environment was turning against the beast, and Marcus was the one controlling it. But the Queen wasn't pleased. Her voice boomed through the arena. "Clever, human, but you're only delaying the inevitable." The beast seemed to understand her words. With a furious roar, it charged again, this time with renewed vigor. It swiped at Marcus, knocking him off his feet. The device skidded across the floor, out of reach. Marcus groaned, pain shooting through his body as he scrambled to his feet. The beast loomed over him, its claws poised to strike. Then his ally acted. With a surprising burst of strength, the alien grabbed the device and activated it. The tendrils of light extended, latching onto the final node. The arena trembled as the ground beneath the beast collapsed, plunging it into a molten chasm. The creature roared one last time before disappearing into the fiery depths. Silence fell over the arena. Marcus and his ally stood panting, bruised but alive. Above them, the Queen's expression was unreadable. For a moment, Marcus thought he saw anger flicker in her golden eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a cold smile. "Well played, human," she said, rising from her throne. "You've survived the final trial. But freedom is not so easily earned." The doors to the arena opened, and the guards marched in. Marcus's relief was short-lived as the Queen's words echoed in his mind. The games were over, but the battle had only just begun. The rise of humanity. The atmosphere in the Queen's Grand Hall was electric with tension. Marcus stood in the center, his body battered but his spirit unbroken. His ally, still weak from the trials, leaned against him for support. The courtiers who once jeered and mocked now whispered among themselves, their voices tinged with unease. Even the guards, towering and menacing, seemed unsure of their footing. High above, Queen Zerethia sat on her throne, her golden eyes fixed on Marcus. She no longer wore the smug confidence that had defined her before. Instead, her gaze was sharp, calculating, perhaps even a little wary. "You have survived my trials," the Queen said, her voice resonating through the hall. "You have done what no other human has managed. But do not mistake survival for victory. You are still nothing more than a pawn in my game." Marcus clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. He had come too far, endured too much, to let her dismiss him like this. "Your game is over, Zerethia," he said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at the edges of his mind. "You've underestimated humanity for the last time." The Queen's lips curved into a cold smile. "Bold words, human. But you are alone here. What can you possibly do against me?" Marcus reached into his pocket, pulling out the small device that had been his lifeline throughout the trials. Its blue glow pulsed faintly, but its power was undeniable. He held it up for all to see. "I'm not alone," he said, his voice rising. "You've enslaved countless beings, crushed their spirits, and ruled through fear. But fear isn't enough to keep control forever. You've shown us your weakness, and now it's time for you to face the consequences." The courtiers fell silent, their whispers replaced by a collective intake of breath. The queen's golden eyes narrowed, her expression darkening. "You dare to challenge me?" she hissed, rising from her throne. Her towering form cast a long shadow across the hall, but Marcus didn't flinch. "I dare," Marcus said. "Not for me, but for every life you've trampled underfoot." The queen raised her hand, and the guards stepped forward, their weapons drawn. The tension in the room reached a breaking point. Marcus glanced at his ally, who nodded weakly but firmly. Together, they had come this far. They weren't about to stop now. Marcus activated the device. The room erupted in chaos. The device's tendrils of light shot out, latching onto the walls, the floor, and even the queen's throne. The alien technology, so meticulously crafted to serve her, began to flicker and destabilize. The courtiers screamed as the ground beneath them trembled, cracks spreading like veins across the crystalline floor. The queen's voice thundered above the commotion. "Fools! You think you can overthrow me? I am Zyrithia, ruler of this galaxy. You are nothing." But Marcus wasn't listening. The device had done its work, connecting to the heart of the queen's technological empire. A series of holographic displays appeared around him, showing systems and controls he couldn't fully understand. But he didn't need to. He had one goal: to dismantle the queen's power. "Focus on the power cores," his ally rasped, pointing to one of the holograms. "If we take them down, her control over the guards and the arena will collapse." Marcus nodded, his hands moving quickly to input commands. The queen's guards lunged toward him, but the device emitted a shockwave that sent them sprawling. The courtiers began to flee, their fear overtaking their loyalty. The queen, however, was far from defeated. With a roar, she descended from her throne, her claws extended. She moved faster than Marcus had anticipated, closing the distance between them in seconds. Her golden eyes burned with rage as she raised her hand to strike. But before she could land the blow, Marcus's ally stepped forward. Summoning the last of his strength, he activated a secondary function on the device. A protective field surrounded Marcus, deflecting the queen's attack. The energy backlash sent her staggering backward, her roar of frustration shaking the hall. "You think this will stop me?" she snarled, her voice laced with fury. "I am eternal." "No," Marcus said, his voice calm and resolute. "You're just a tyrant who's afraid of losing control." With a final input on the device, Marcus targeted the power cores. The room shook violently as the queen's systems began to collapse. The shimmering walls dimmed, the oppressive energy fields flickered and died, and the guards froze, their weapons dropping as their control links were severed. The queen's roar turned into a scream of rage as her empire crumbled around her. Marcus stood tall, his chest heaving, but his resolve unshaken. He had done it. He had turned her own power against her. The courtiers, once loyal to the queen, now looked to Marcus with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. For the first time, they saw not a slave but a leader. The queen, weakened and defeated, glared at him from the ruins of her throne. "You may have won today, human," she spat, her voice trembling with fury. "But this is far from over." Marcus stepped forward, his gaze steady. "Maybe it's not over, but it's the beginning of the end. For you and for tyrants like you." He turned to the gathered courtiers and guards. "You've seen what she is. You've felt her cruelty. It's time to choose. Will you continue to live in fear, or will you fight for something better?" The room was silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, the courtiers began to kneel. The guards followed, their weapons discarded. The tide had turned. Marcus looked at his ally, who managed a faint smile despite his injuries. Together, they had done the impossible. They had risen against a seemingly invincible queen and sparked the beginnings of a rebellion. As Marcus stood amidst the ruins of the queen's empire, he felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a victory for him. It was a victory for humanity and every being who had suffered under Zarathia's rule. And it was only the beginning.